It was just another morning in the small town of Meridian. A crisp, chilly breeze swept through the streets, and the usual hum of cars filled the air. I was at the coffee shop, sipping my morning brew, when I first noticed her. She walked in with slow, deliberate steps, her silver hair neatly pinned back into a tight bun. She wore a long, grey wool coat that seemed far too elegant for such a modest place. Her face was calm, composed, almost serene, though there was an air of something deeper hidden behind her eyes. The way she carried herself was a bit off, but not in an obvious way. More like she was someone who had seen things, someone who had lived a life far beyond the walls of this town. The barista called out her name, Mrs. Montgomery. And she approached the counter with quiet grace, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. She seemed to glide, as though she didn't quite touch the ground. I was leaning back in my chair, studying her from a distance. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about her seemed different. My thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind me. "Do you know who she is?" A man's voice, thick with curiosity, asked. I turned around to see my old friend and local sheriff, Dale, standing with a cup of coffee in hand. "No, but she seems like someone who doesn't quite fit here," I replied. He chuckled lightly. "You're right. She's just a widow, but she's here for a reason. Her son, well, let's just say he's not the kind of person you'd expect." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Dale smirked and took a sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving the woman. "You'll see soon enough." That's when I felt the first ripple of curiosity. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a typical widow, and that her son was someone important, someone who didn't belong in a town like this. But as she made her way out of the coffee shop, I pushed the thought aside, thinking it was just another small-town mystery. Little did I know, that day would be the beginning of a story that would shake the very foundation of everything I thought I knew. The days passed, and I kept seeing her around town. Mrs. Montgomery was always alone, walking the streets with a quiet confidence that seemed out of place in a town like Meridian. I tried to gather more information, but people didn't seem to know much about her. It was like she was a ghost, rarely spoken of but always present. One evening, as I left the local bar, I saw her again. This time, though, she was with someone. A young man, tall, well-built, wearing a sharp, tailored suit. The way he carried himself made it clear he wasn't from around here. He exuded authority, power even. The pair stood near the curb, and I couldn't help but overhear their conversation. "Mother, you've been too discreet," the young man said, his voice low but steady. "We don't have the luxury of hiding anymore." Mrs. Montgomery's face remained calm, but I noticed her jaw tighten. She replied with quiet determination, "I know, but we must be careful. The time is not yet right." There was a tension in the air, an unspoken understanding between them. And then, just like that, they both turned and walked down the street, disappearing into the night. The exchange lingered in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this young man, her son, was far more significant than he let on. But who could he possibly be? Why was Mrs. Montgomery, of all people, so intent on secrecy? It was the next day that I got the answer. I was in town hall, trying to sort out a few documents when the door opened. I didn't look up immediately, but when I heard the heavy footsteps approaching, I couldn't help myself. I glanced up, and there he was. The man from the night before. He stood at the door, his presence demanding attention. The room grew silent as he scanned the room, his eyes finally landing on me. "You," he said, his voice commanding. "You're the one who knows my mother." I nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. "I've met her, yes." His eyes narrowed as he stepped closer. "You don't understand the danger of this place. Meridian is more than it seems. My mother didn't just bring me here for nostalgia. She brought me here because she knew you would figure it out." Before I could respond, he turned on his heel and walked out, leaving me in stunned silence. It all came crashing down at that moment. The widow. Her son. The tension in the air. Mrs. Montgomery wasn't just any widow, she was part of something much larger. Her son, I was beginning to realize, wasn't just any ordinary man. He wasn't just a son trying to carry on his mother's legacy. No, he was someone with power. Someone with connections that reached far beyond the borders of Meridian. The real question was, why had they come here? I couldn't let it go. The encounter in town hall, the mysterious words, the feeling that something was about to break wide open. I had to know more. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was a gut instinct telling me that I was in the midst of something bigger than I had ever imagined. Over the next few days, I kept my distance but kept watching. Mrs. Montgomery and her son, whose name I had learned was Adam, seemed to be everywhere, but never together for long. He would come and go, always dressed in expensive suits and carrying himself like someone accustomed to being obeyed. His mother, on the other hand, remained in the background, always poised, never showing a hint of vulnerability. But I could tell, there was something in her eyes that spoke of untold secrets, of things she regretted, and of decisions she could never take back. It was a quiet afternoon when the phone call came. It was Dale, the sheriff, his voice unusually serious. "You need to meet me," he said. "Now." I knew this wasn't about a simple town matter. I grabbed my coat and headed straight for the sheriff's office. When I arrived, Dale was pacing in front of the building, his brow furrowed. "You're not going to believe this," he started, motioning for me to follow him into his office. "But I've been hearing rumors. About Adam Montgomery." "Rumors?" I asked, sitting down across from him. "What kind of rumors?" Dale leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "His mother is more than just a widow, like I told you. She's connected to people who have power. Real power. But Adam is someone else entirely." I waited for him to continue, my heart racing. "The Montgomerys weren't always like this," he said, looking out the window, as if searching for the right words. "They were quiet. They kept to themselves. But I've recently learned that Adam, he's been involved in a lot of things. Things that no one in this town should know about. Some bad business, shady connections. People have died because of it." I froze. "What kind of business are we talking about?" Dale shook his head. "I don't know the details yet, but it's worse than anything we've seen around here. Adam's not just any businessman. He's tangled up with organized crime, government deals, and people who'll do anything to protect their interests." It was starting to make sense. Mrs. Montgomery wasn't just hiding because of grief or loss. She was hiding because of who her son was, someone who had stepped into a world of shadows, and now the shadows were following him. And her. I stood up, pacing. "So, what now? What do we do?" Dale's eyes were grim. "We wait. But we also prepare. It's only a matter of time before they come for us. And you're involved now. Whether you want to be or not." That was when I knew. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a countdown to something I couldn't outrun. I had to confront Adam, confront the truth, before it swallowed us all whole. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Everywhere I went, it felt like someone was observing me from the shadows. I couldn't help but think about what Dale had said, how I was now involved. I didn't know how much longer I had before I would be pulled deeper into this mess. I tried to keep things normal, worked, went home, but my mind kept circling back to Adam Montgomery. I had to know more about him, confront him before the situation got out of hand. That afternoon, while walking down Main Street, I saw him, Adam, standing outside the old courthouse. He was talking to a man in a suit, but the moment he saw me, his expression hardened. The conversation stopped. The man in the suit seemed to sense the shift, nodding at Adam before walking away. "Did you want something?" Adam's voice was smooth but clipped, like he was already irritated with my presence. I hesitated for a moment, then walked up to him, feeling the weight of the confrontation I was about to have. "I want to know who you really are," I said, my voice firm. Adam's lips curled into a small smile, but there was no warmth in it, only something colder, more calculating. "You think you have the right to ask me that? You're just a town resident, a bystander." "Maybe. But I've seen enough to know something's off," I shot back. "Your mother, your family, there's more to all of this than you're letting on. Why don't you stop hiding behind your carefully crafted facade and tell me the truth?" He leaned in slightly, his eyes narrowing. "You don't understand the world I move in. You don't know who you're talking to." I didn't flinch, even though every instinct told me to step back. There was power in Adam, power I couldn't begin to understand, but I wouldn't let him intimidate me. Not now. Not when I was this close to the truth. "You're right," I said, my voice quieter now but no less determined. "I don't know everything about you. But I know enough to understand that you and your mother are connected to something dangerous. And I won't sit by and watch it consume this town." For a moment, he was silent, and I thought maybe I'd pushed him too far. But then, Adam spoke, his tone changing from anger to something almost amused. "You think you can stop me?" he asked, his smile creeping back. "You think a town like Meridian can hold someone like me back?" "I don't know if I can stop you," I said, "but I sure as hell can expose you." There was a flash of something in his eyes, something like admiration, mixed with irritation. "You're stubborn. I'll give you that. But don't make the mistake of thinking you're the one pulling the strings here. People much bigger than you and me are involved in this." Before I could respond, he turned on his heel and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there for a moment, processing everything he had said. This wasn't just about Adam or his mother. There were people behind him, pulling the strings. The threat wasn't just local, it was something much larger, and much more dangerous. I realized then that I had to take action. No more waiting. No more hiding. If I wanted to uncover the truth, I would need to go after it head on, even if it meant putting everything, and everyone, I knew at risk. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced through the conversation with Adam, the way his calm demeanor had cracked just for a moment. There was something bigger at play here, something deeper than I had imagined. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had underestimated the power Adam and his family wielded. They weren't just wealthy. They were connected in ways I couldn't even begin to fathom. I had to act. But how? The next morning, I decided to visit the one person who might know more than anyone in this town, Ruth, the local historian and unofficial keeper of all the town's secrets. She ran the antique shop on Main Street, a place that was more like a museum than a store. If anyone knew about the Montgomerys, or about anything shady happening in town, it would be her. The bell above the door jingled as I entered the dusty shop. Ruth was behind the counter, sorting through a box of old newspapers. "Morning," I said, walking over to her. "Got a minute?" Ruth looked up, her sharp eyes assessing me for a moment before she smiled. "For you. Always. What's on your mind?" I hesitated. The question was simple, but the weight of it was heavy. "I need to know about Adam Montgomery. And his family. I think they're involved in something much bigger than anyone around here realizes." Ruth's face stiffened at the mention of the name. For a split second, she looked like she had seen a ghost. Then, she quickly masked it with a polite smile. "Adam Montgomery," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying her unease. "Well, there's a lot to know about them. They've been here for generations, you know." "I know that much," I said, my tone more insistent. "But there's more, isn't there? Something, secret." Ruth sighed, setting the papers aside. "You really want to know? It's not something people around here talk about much. It's all buried in the past, but sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried." I nodded. "I need to know everything." This town, it's more than just a quiet little place, isn't it? She glanced around, almost as if making sure no one was listening, then motioned for me to sit down. You're right. It isn't just a quiet place. You see, the Montgomery family used to be involved in the old railroad industry. But when they lost their fortune, they didn't just disappear. They diversified. They made new deals with people who had power. I'm talking about government contracts, military ties, and a long list of connections you don't want to mess with. I leaned in, my heart pounding. What kind of connections? She paused, as if weighing how much to reveal. There's been talk over the years. People say Adam's father wasn't just a businessman. He was an arms dealer, international, shady dealings. And Adam, he's following in those footsteps. The family's always been involved in something beneath the surface. They don't just play by the rules. I felt a chill run down my spine. The pieces were coming together, but they were darker than I could have ever imagined. Adam Montgomery wasn't just a rich kid with a powerful family, he was part of a dangerous legacy. Is there any way to stop them? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ruth looked at me, her eyes filled with an understanding that made me uneasy. You can try, but be careful. People who go up against the Montgomerys don't always come out unscathed. This isn't just about business or politics. It's about survival. And they've been playing this game for a long time. I stood up, my mind swirling with the gravity of it all. Thanks, Ruth. I don't know what I'll do with all of this, but I can't just let it go. You're welcome, she said quietly. But don't say I didn't warn you. Some things are better left uncovered. As I left the shop, I felt the weight of her words settle on my shoulders. I had no choice but to press forward. But now I understood the true danger of the Montgomery family. They were connected to a world far outside the boundaries of this small town, and it was a world that would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. It wasn't just about exposing them anymore, it was about surviving whatever came next. By the time I left Ruth's shop, the air had grown heavier, thick with the weight of everything I had just learned. It felt like the world around me had shifted, like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, and every step I took could push me deeper into the abyss. Adam Montgomery and his family weren't just a small-town enigma anymore. They were dangerous. Their reach extended far beyond Meridian, and if I kept digging, there was a good chance I might find myself buried under the weight of the truth. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adam's cold, calculating smile, the same one he had given me when I had confronted him earlier. It was a reminder that he didn't care about me, about anyone here. He was part of a machine, a much larger operation, and I was nothing more than a speck of dust in his way. The phone call came just before dawn. Is this your name? A voice on the other end asked, its tone sharp and professional. Yes, I replied, my heart racing. I'm calling because we know you've been asking questions. And you've been poking around where you shouldn't, the voice continued. You've got two options, stop asking about the Montgomerys, or, you'll start seeing things you can't unsee. I didn't need to ask who we was. I had a pretty good idea. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the words came out strained. Who is this? What do you want from me? The voice laughed, a low, unsettling sound. What we want is simple. We want you to forget about everything. We want you to let this go. People like you don't belong in this world. There was a moment of silence, and then the voice added, think about it carefully, your name. We know where you live. We know where you go. You won't see us coming, but we'll be watching. And then, just like that, the line went dead. I stood there in the dim light of the early morning, the phone still pressed to my ear, my hand trembling. The warning was clear, and it was more than just a threat, it was a promise. I tossed the phone aside and stood there in the darkness, my mind racing. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. They were sending a message, warning me to back off. But I couldn't. I couldn't walk away from what I had started. The truth, whatever it was, needed to be exposed. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how far I had gone. These weren't just empty threats. The Montgomerys had the power to make people disappear. People who had dug too deep. I wasn't sure how much time I had left before they decided to deal with me the same way. I had one choice: go deeper into the heart of the storm and find out everything, or back off and live in fear for the rest of my life. The decision felt like a no-brainer, but I knew the consequences would be severe. If I was going to uncover the truth, I would have to confront the Montgomerys directly. I had to find out who was behind this, who else was involved, and who I could trust. It was time to face the danger head-on. But I had to be prepared for what I was about to uncover. The moment of reckoning was coming, and there would be no turning back. The phone call had shaken me, but it also solidified my resolve. I couldn't back down now, not when I was so close to uncovering the truth. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The message they had sent was clear: they didn't want me poking around, but that only made me more determined. The next morning, I called Dale. He needed to know everything, but I had no illusions about how dangerous this had become. He wasn't just a sheriff, he was part of the system, and I needed to know if I could trust him. If he was going to help, I needed to be upfront. "Dale, we need to talk," I said when he answered. "I know," he replied, his voice low. "I've been hearing things too. It's bad, your name. Really bad. Adam Montgomery is only the tip of the iceberg. I've seen signs, heard whispers, and now, I'm starting to connect the dots. It's not just local power at play here. This goes way beyond Meridian." I took a deep breath. "I need your help. But I need to know you're in. There's no turning back once we dig into this." There was a long pause, and then he spoke. "You're right about that. I've been covering up for these people for years, looking the other way, but now I'm seeing what's really happening. I'm in. But we need to be smart about this. We need to move quietly." I knew it was risky, but Dale was right. We couldn't afford to make waves. If we were going to get answers, we had to be careful. We couldn't trust anyone, not in this town, not now. The Montgomerys had their fingers in too many pies, and one wrong move could put us in the crosshairs. "Where do we start?" I asked, my heart pounding in anticipation. "We start with the old warehouse by the docks," Dale said. "It's been abandoned for years, but I've heard rumors. People say it's where Adam and his associates meet. I think we'll find answers there." I didn't hesitate. We made a plan to meet at dusk, when the shadows would work in our favor. The sun was setting as I drove toward the warehouse, a chill running down my spine. Every instinct told me I was walking into something dangerous, something I couldn't undo once I stepped inside. When I arrived, the warehouse loomed in the distance, dark and silent. The windows were boarded up, and the metal doors were rusted with age. It was the perfect place to hide in plain sight. Dale was already there, standing in the shadows near the back entrance. He motioned for me to follow him. "We'll go in through the rear," he whispered. "Stay close, and stay quiet." I nodded, my nerves on edge. We crept around the building, the only sound our footsteps on the gravel. As we reached the back door, Dale pulled out a set of lockpicks. Within moments, the door creaked open, and we slipped inside. The air inside the warehouse was thick with dust, and the space was filled with the scent of rust and mildew. The faint hum of machinery could be heard in the distance, but there was no sign of life. I felt a sense of unease, like something was watching us from the darkness. "Stay sharp," Dale whispered, his eyes scanning the room. "They've got security cameras, and they know how to keep things quiet." We moved cautiously, sticking to the edges of the room, our steps echoing off the concrete floor. As we reached the center, we saw it. A large metal door at the far end of the warehouse, slightly ajar. Through the crack, we could see figures moving inside. "They're in there," Dale muttered. "This is it. We need to find a way to listen in." I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. We were close, but so were they. The people inside that room weren't just criminals. They were connected to something far bigger, something that had been hidden for years. If we were going to get out alive, we had to be careful. Dale pulled out a small listening device from his jacket and began setting it up on a nearby crate. My heart raced as he made the final adjustments. We had no backup. No plan for what would happen if things went south. But there was no turning back now. Just as the device clicked on, a voice echoed through the warehouse, clear and cold. "Did you bring the files?" the voice said, and I felt my pulse quicken. It was Adam Montgomery. The moment had arrived. We were about to hear the secrets that could bring everything crashing down. And there was no telling what would happen once the truth came out. The air in the warehouse felt suffocating as the voices on the other side of the metal door grew clearer. Adam Montgomery's voice was unmistakable, his words calm but laced with something colder: authority, power, control. "Did you bring the files?" he asked again, his tone now sharper. I glanced at Dale, his face tense, eyes locked on the door. He gave a barely perceptible nod, signaling me to stay quiet and stay out of sight. I held my breath as the sound of footsteps approached the door. Then, a second voice broke through the tense silence. "I've got them," a man said, his voice muffled but steady. "Everything you need. The transfer papers, the assets, and the list of people who need to be taken care of." My stomach dropped. People who need to be taken care of. This wasn't just business. This was a whole other level of corruption. A level where lives didn't matter, where deals were made in shadows, and power was maintained by silence and fear. "Perfect," Adam said, his voice cold and calculating. "We move forward tomorrow. Make sure the job gets done clean. We can't afford to leave any loose ends." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. What were they talking about? What job? Who were they planning to eliminate? Before I could process the full weight of what I had just heard, Dale motioned for me to pull back. His eyes were wide with urgency. "We need to get out of here. Now," he whispered. We backed away, staying in the shadows, but as we turned to leave, a door creaked open behind us. A figure emerged from the darkness, and we froze. It was a tall man, dressed in black, his expression grim and hard as he scanned the room. Then his eyes landed on us. In a split second, his hand went to his belt, where a gun was holstered. The cold metal gleamed under the dim light as he started toward us, his footsteps quick and deliberate. Dale reacted first, pushing me toward the back door. "Go," he hissed. "I'll handle this." I didn't think twice. I sprinted toward the exit, my heart hammering in my chest as I heard the sound of heavy footsteps chasing after me. I burst through the door into the alley outside, taking a sharp right and running toward the street. I heard the man behind me, gaining ground. "Dale!" I shouted, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. I made it to the street, my breath ragged, but I didn't stop running. I turned a corner, breathless, desperate to find somewhere to hide, but as I glanced back, I saw the black SUV parked at the far end of the street. I knew then it wasn't just me they were coming for, it was everyone. The walls were closing in, and the secrets I had uncovered weren't just dangerous, they were life-threatening. I made a split-second decision, ducking into a nearby alley. I had no idea where Dale was, or if he had even managed to escape. But I knew one thing, I couldn't trust anyone, not anymore. If I was going to survive this, I had to get out of town. I had to disappear, take what I knew and run, before Adam Montgomery and his people came for me. I didn't stop running. As I fled into the night, I could hear the distant sound of sirens approaching. But it wasn't enough to make me feel safe. I knew that the moment I stopped running, the danger wouldn't just find me, it would swallow me whole. Meridian was no longer the quiet town I had thought it was. It had always been a hiding place for something darker. And now, I was a part of it, whether I liked it or not. The truth I had uncovered was bigger than me, bigger than anything I had ever imagined. And there was no turning back now. But I had to keep running. Because as long as I did, there was still a chance to survive.